Is it true that if you prefer close proximity with someone to find your own self-soothing that you are a codependent? Now, in the previous episode, we talked about self-regulation. So if you haven't taken a listen, you can go back. This will all make better sense. But if you decide to start here, good enough. Now, in a very individualistic culture, there are some confusing messages that when you automatically seek someone for comfort, that it means that you are not self-reliant, that you're a codependent. Now, this is not only false, but it forgets that we humans are part of a larger ecosystem, that a man who can live in his own island is an illusion. Today, let's talk about the difference between co-regulation and codependency and the side effects of a healthy dose of seeking others for comfort, also known as co-regulation. Are Filipinos truly bilingual? We use the same language at home but speak in love languages foreign to each other, together but separated. Kamusta? I'm Rowan, licensed psychotherapist mom, immigrant twice, first generation Pinoy raising my mixed Filipino American children in America. I found that after visiting 500 Filipino homes, I continue to be a student of the culture. In this podcast, we would be seatmates in this beautiful cultural classroom. And by the way, did I tell you I need my kaping barako straight from Batangas before each class? If you're interested in learning the deep intricacies of the Filipino culture, especially as it merged with American culture, talks about trauma-informed care, and deepening your Filipino relationships across generations, which includes my fave topic, Pinoy love languages, you're in the right place. Did you know that you can leave a voicemail to this Filipina therapist? If you do so, I will be so kilig. Now, it's easy. All you need to do is click on those show details, and there will be a link asking you to leave a voicemail. And I thank you in advance if you decide to do that or not. But thank you anyway for being here. Welcome, and this is Rowan. Welcome to the Pinoy Love Language podcast. I hope you're having a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, a beautiful moment. Now, let's go straight to the point. What is co regulation? Now, to explain, I'm going to again give you an image. So, if you're not feeling well, right, when you are trying to seek close proximity with someone, it is almost like reaching for their blanket and going under that blanket because yours might be too thin or it's just not enough. Okay. Now, in the Filipino culture, it's really important to understand that in general, we are co regulators. I always say in general because we're all unique, we're all different. I am just talking about the general cultural expression. So we are more co-regulators, meaning we're more comfortable seeking others for comfort than individualistic culture. And let me give you an example. If we are pacifying a child, let's say in the motherland, there are a lot of available emotional resources. So you might have an auntie, a neighbor, an ate. So if a child starts crying, let's say Sarah, guess what? Someone will try or attempt to pacify her. So might be playing peekaboo, bulaga, or open, close, open, and do whatever it takes to pacify Sarah. And usually this you can observe this easily for kids who are 3 years and under. And what you can find is that there is very little gender difference when it comes to this part. I think when I listen to some studies, when maybe the author may not have spent a lot of time in the Philippines, there is a concept that males in the Philippines are not as engaged when it comes to nurturing the young. Now, this is true that when women are available, they might be seen as the primary caregiver, as with a lot of other culture. But the males are also available. Okay. Of course, there's a difference in socioeconomic status, and we won't get so much about that difference. But if you just travel in the Philippines, riding the tricycle, the jeep, you can see a lot of males actually carrying babies, especially maybe in the middle class to the lower. Everybody's trying to help out, if you will. So, in that same example, there are a lot of emotional resources. So there is little space for Sarah to be alone and to find a way to self regulate, which is an important skill. Now, if Sarah were in America, she's crying, she's 3 years old, she would have to learn how to self regulate. That's the call of our system here. So if Sarah was going to be dropped off in the daycare or a relative, if she's going to be crying the whole day seeking for mom who needs to go to work, she will be anxious and she'll have to develop a way to cope. And we see this in the stranger situation experiment. This is the experiment that's been done thousands of times in different countries, and where a child is separated from the parent, child is left in the room alone and then is reconciled with the mother after some time. This whole experiment takes about 20 minutes. And what researchers are able to predict with such great accuracy is that depending on how the child has been made to feel in the mother's presence and how attuned the mother is responding to the baby, when the baby needs to be felt, the child feels safe, the child is able to explore his or her world knowing that the parent's going to be there, that you could see that the child is able to be comforted once the mother returns back in the room. And you can also see a child who's learned to cope, that when they're left alone and then the mom comes back, some would be very anxious, they'll cry, but the mother's not able to calm them down in a reasonable duration. The child continues to be anxious. It's possible that the mom is not consistent in being able to attune to her child. It's also possible that the child will be nonchalant, right? Still playing the mother's back, and it's like looking and it's like, oh, okay, you're there. The child has learned to cope. Now, it is very important to stress that it's not a contest whether it's better to co regulate or to self regulate. They're all beautiful things, and we all have to learn how to self regulate, which actually we learn later than co regulate, which is in the mother caregiver diet. The child is asking to co-regulate because at birth a child is not capable of doing that, doesn't have that agency to do that. So it's the mother who calms down the baby by her heartbeat, her shh sound, her rocking the baby, her soothing strategy calms down the baby. Now what happens in immigration, because Filipinos are mainly co-regulators, and it doesn't mean when I say they're mainly co-regulators that it means they don't know how to self-regulate. It's a preferred way to soothe because in the context of the culture it works better, it's more effective to co-regulate, to go under somebody else's umbrella. So if it were raining, okay, the rain could be frustration. If you're not feeling well, you're just upset, that's the rain. And if your umbrella is a bit flimsy, you might go under somebody else's bigger umbrella so that you won't get rained on. So that's another picture of co-regulation. The dilemma occurs when we expect our children to co-regulate with us, but there is little practice in America to co-regulate. The practice more is to self-regulate. And in the Philippines, there is more practice to co-regulate. But then perhaps the immigrant might be expecting the child to co-regulate using Pinoy love languages that are indirect, and the child is not able to quickly grasp it, right? So, for instance, if a mother is using parinig, which is talking about someone in earshot. They can hear it. They're not talking about that person directly, but they're wanting to convey the message. So, for example, someone would say, "Hay nako, nakakainis talaga yung ibang tao dyan. They just eat and they don't wash their dishes," right? So, you're there, you know that that message is for you. And so the parent is using a very indirect and sounds even scornful sometimes, but they actually are wanting to connect using approach that can cause more disconnect in American culture where we expect people to directly express. Did you want me to wash the dishes? Why can't you just tell me directly? Which is often the complaint. Say what you mean, just say what you want, express yourself directly. And there are many reasons in the Filipino culture why we may feel that this is not a safe way to express ourselves. Now, I talked about this in the masterclass Pakiramdam, and I've shared this a few times in this podcast. Forgive me, but it's actually just packed with information that I wish we had more of, because the truth is, like I shared with the previous episode, we might have many tips for how adults talk to the younger generation Filipino and vice versa. But the truth is, without understanding the very basic tenets of how we co-regulate, how we seek and express love uniquely, things would be amiss. And so when we return, I'm going to talk about the difference between co-regulation and codependency using the kilikili metaphor. Do you know kilikili? Armpit. So, dyan ka lang. If you think someone else would benefit from listening to this podcast or specifically this episode, please share. Sharing is caring. Information is meant to be shared in communal spaces, especially those that are meant to connect and to encourage healing. Have you downloaded the free webinar on Speak the Pinoy Love Language? This webinar is free and can be accessed whenever you're ready. And it talks about the different ways that we communicate a la Western way and Filipino way. So all the links will be in the show notes. Go check it out. Again, it's free. Now, are you ready for the kilikili metaphor? So let's talk about co-regulation and codependency. It seems to me there's a lot of confusion when it comes to that. Now, if you're not feeling well, usually you'll get a thermometer, right? You're like, do I have a fever? So you put that in your kilikili, right? And you're like, oh, it's 102. I have a fever. What do you do when you're not feeling well? You might reach out for medicine, a cup of tea. You might just chill, binge watch Netflix, whatever comforts you. So, in that example, this is you self regulating, soothing yourself, right? Now, if that's not enough, you're like, I just feel terrible. You might want to reach out and get somebody else's warmth to feel better. When I was a kid, just the palm of my mom's hand on my forehead makes me feel good. And especially when she's rubbing the Vicks Vapor Rub on my chest, it just feels so good. And that's the wonderful thing about co-regulation. It's a beautiful thing. Now, when you are wanting to co-regulate, if you're not feeling well, you might actually ask a partner or your mom, can I go under your blanket? Feeling the warmth of that person, making you even more safe, secure, and feeling their warmth. So that's self regulation and co regulation. Now, the difference with codependency is this: if you're not feeling well, you go get the thermometer and you put it in your partner's kilikili, right? And then you read. It's like, oh, wow, he's not feeling well. When in fact, you're the one who wasn't feeling well and you were trying to gauge your temperature. Then what you do is you do your best to give whatever you think your partner needs so they will feel good. Because when they feel good, you also feel good. Your emotional state is based on someone else's emotional temperature. Do you see the difference? It's very distinct. I thought of the kilikili metaphor to really give you an insight, right? So when we think about that, self-regulation, you're doing something to soothe yourself. When you're co-regulating, you simply know that, oh, I'm reaching out for someone so that I can feel their energy. I really appreciate that. It's almost that Vicks on your chest. And when you are a codependent, you don't know how to gauge your own emotional temperature. You're basing it on someone else's. And imagine the uproar, right? When you're not able to meet your partner's need, because what you're trying to actually do is meet your own. It is true that in anything that we do, and if we do it in the extreme, if we co regulate only and we don't know how to self regulate, it could actually lead to codependency. And at times, when someone seems so self regulated, they seem so calm, they don't get offended, they're not faced by anything, it's possible that they're not fully self regulated but more detached. Those things, anything in the extreme, when we use those things, may come from a longing or a wound in the past that needs tending to. So, again, just to summarize, it's a beautiful thing to be able to practice both to self regulate and to co regulate. Remember, we are humans, animals, and early humans. We see the pattern that we need each other to feel good. It's almost that umbrella that we want to be under. It's safe there. It's okay to reach out for someone. In summary, it's both a beautiful thing. It's not a contest whether you only self regulate or you only co regulate. Often we hear that a lot in social media in the Western culture, in America, self care, self care, self care, which is a fantastic thing. And I'd really recommend that. Sometimes the co regulators have a hard time with that. And it's true that sometimes when you're a co regulator, you might need just a little bit space. The self regulators needs much more space. The bubble between one person to the other might be, the physical distance might be wider. And that's just a cultural difference. And everything about learning each other's love language is learning about what's effective, not so much what is right or wrong or who's the better person. It's not a contest, it's actually being on the same team. So I'm going to leave you with that. Again, if you have any questions for this Pinay therapist, go ahead and email me info@calamancyjuice.com and simply put the title line for your email, Ask This Pinay Therapist. For now, I thank you and sa uulitin.